So I was perusing the internet like I often do, and I came across an interesting situation where somebody is tendering their resignation and they've got a boss that's being overly pesky about where it is that they're heading, and they're kind of conflicted about what they should do. So I want to break this down, give you some advice on how to handle those 2 weeks notices so that you don't screw yourself and then potentially jeopardize the job opportunity. So let's head over and check it out. Okay, so it says that the boss is pressuring me to tell him where my new job is and what the pay is. Do I have to tell him? After I gave my 2 weeks notice resigning, he called and asked where I was going. I said I was told not to say so, which is actually good advice. You shouldn't disclose where it is that you're going for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about in a second. He then followed up with an email in all caps asking again, saying he wants to make sure there's no conflict of interest, and even though he could find out through a Google search after I left, he would prefer me telling him now to make sure they don't handle our cases, which they don't. So I'm assuming this is some sort of a case management job, and he wants to make sure there's no conflict of interest. The boss also said that he would appreciate if I told him my pay so they could better formulate the company pay. This is only the second day into my 2 weeks notice, and I feel like it's going to be a long 2 weeks. I don't want to leave on bad terms. What's the best way to handle this? Edit, I also told him I wasn't going to tell my coworkers, thinking employers would appreciate that so that there isn't an air of uncertainty, as I myself want privacy. He responded by saying he was going to announce it at the weekly meeting in an hour where 60 people are attending. My phone is going to ring off the hook. Okay, so here's the deal with 2 weeks notices. In an at-will employer in the United States, there's no legal requirement for you to even provide a 2 weeks notice. It is simply meant as a courtesy. So let's get that out of the way first. There's also no legal requirement for you to tell them where you're going, how much you're making, what your job title is, what the location is. They can't require that information or do anything to force you to hand it over. The only instance where I could see they may have a vested interest in knowing where it is that you're going is if it is indeed to a competitor and you have a non-compete. But even in those cases, it would be very difficult for them to try to enforce it. Generally, there's a burden of proof on the employer to prove that it would be something that would be detrimental to their company. And on positions that aren't very strategic or very senior, it's going to be a hard battle for them to win. And here's the thing, there are some unscrupulous employers and bosses out there who may actually try to torpedo you by going behind the scenes, behind your back, and messing with things. Maybe they know somebody at the company, especially if it's a small industry. They could start making a few phone calls, maybe say, you got to think twice about this guy, he's not really a good performer. Or they could potentially threaten them by saying, you're going after our people, we're going to come after you. And I actually have had instances where that has actually happened to us, where we've recruited somebody, then the CEO of this other company comes to us and says, hey, stop poaching our people, even though they came to us. So it's always best, to this person's point, to never disclose where it is that you're going. I would just keep it professional and above the cuff and just say, I'm leaving for another opportunity that's better in alignment with my career goals. Really appreciate everything you've done here, and I would love to maintain good relations. Hopefully I can get a good reference from you in the future, and let's stay connected. And if there is a question of conflict of interest, I would make sure that you talk to the new company's legal team to make sure that they know about it so that they can run interference for you. Because oftentimes, if we're recruiting from a competitor, there might be some gentleman's agreements going on, but their legal team should be able to help you run interference. And if there is indeed a conflict of interest, I would make sure to consult a labor attorney in your local area just to make sure that you know what your options are, because the first employer could come after you for conflict of interest or breach of contract if it's a non-compete. So just keep that in mind. Now, as far as disclosing your rate of pay, I absolutely would not offer that. If this person is just trying to get reconnaissance from you and trying to learn what the competitors are doing, you have to just make a decision. For me, it's not worth the risk. I don't want them to know anything about my personal situation. Or they're trying to come at you with a counteroffer, and you know how I feel about accepting counteroffers in general if you've made a decision to leave. But if the boss is becoming overbearing in the 2 weeks, you can firmly but professionally remind them that the 2 weeks notice is a courtesy to them to help get a head start on replacing your role, and that you can leave if you don't feel comfortable. So you can politely but professionally push back and say, I would appreciate it if you honored my wishes and kept this confidential, and please stop asking me where I'm going. Because listen, if your boss is this upset and pushy about this, they're probably not going to be all that supportive behind the scenes anyway, and you should just read the room there. So hopefully you have a better relationship than that with your boss, but I know unfortunately in some cases we don't, and you might have a petty boss. And I want to point out one other quick thing here is when you tender your resignation, oftentimes companies will try to throw more and more work on your plate to try to get it finished. The goal of the 2 weeks notice is to ramp down your work, not take on more work. And so you need to be firm there as well. Remind them that this is their opportunity to offboard and that you won't be taking on any more cases or clients or any more projects. You're going to be finishing up the things that you have, handing over things that need to be handed off, and then you're going to be training potentially a replacement, and that's it. And if they push too hard and try to take advantage there, just quit your job, walk off into the sunset, and forget all about them. Remember, we're the CEOs of our career. We won't allow somebody else to walk all over us. And in particular, when you're leaving, they don't have a whole lot of leverage. So that's what I would do if I was in my 2 weeks notice and I was faced with an overly intrusive boss. And if you're somebody that's wondering if you should quit your job to begin with, or you're having difficulty navigating office politics effectively, I've actually created a good resource. It's called the Ultimate Career Blueprint, which breaks down career strategy into a very repeatable and very detailed process. Of course, I break down career mapping so that you know exactly when to quit and what jobs to quit for so that you have the most strength in your job search and in your career. In this course, I help you map out your career so that you can achieve your lofty career goals with expert precision and authority. And I also help you navigate through tricky office politics situations so that you can maintain a high degree of control. I think it's a must-have for anybody that's taking their career seriously. So if you're feeling stuck in place and you're not able to move to the next level of your career, check out the Ultimate Career Blueprint. Anyway, hopefully this was helpful. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you on the next one.